Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, okay. I'll just start going. All right, well, good morning. So I guess we'll start off by turning to Ezra chapter 4. And give you just a minute, but starting at verse 6. All right, so Ezra 4 and 6. At the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. So this accusation, so these next two slides are just kind of a continuation of last week. But so the accusation is kind of reflective back on Esther, where the king had agreed to destroy the Jews because he was motivated by the potential spoil from those murdered. And then going on in Ezra, verse 7, in the days of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Bishlam and Mithredath, Tabeel, and the rest of his associates wrote a letter to Artaxerxes. The letter was written in Aramaic script and in the Aramaic language. And skipping down to verse 13, starting in verse 11, actually, for context. This is a copy of the letter they sent him to King Artaxerxes from your servants, the men of Trans-Euphrates. The king should know that the Jews who came up to us from you have gone to Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are restoring the walls and repairing the foundations. Furthermore, the king should know that if this city is built and its walls are restored, no more taxes, tribute, or duty will be paid, and the royal revenues will suffer. So these enemies are kind of using the threat of lost tax revenue to motivate the king to kind of command the Jews to stop. So that's, like in verse 13, if the walls are rebuilt, no more taxes, tribute, or duty will be paid. Then it goes on. In verse 16, we inform the king that if this city is built and its walls are restored, you will be left with nothing in Trans-Euphrates. So just kind of motivating them by that kind of threat of lost tax revenue. And then going on. Going on in Ezra chapter 4 to verse 17. Okay, so verse 17 to 24. Does someone want to read that for me?
Sure. Ezra chapter 4, starting in verse 17.
Yep.
The king sent this reply to Rehum, the commanding officer, Shimshai, the secretary, and the rest of their associates living in Samaria and elsewhere in Trans-Euphrates. Greetings. The letter you sent us has been read and translated in my presence. I issued an order, and a search was made, and it was found that this city has a long history of revolt against kings, and has been a place of rebellion and sedition. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates, and taxes, tribute, and duty were paid to them. Now issue an order to these men to stop work, so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. Be careful not to neglect this matter. Why let this threat grow to the detriment of the royal interests? As soon as the copy of the letter of King Artaxerxes was read to Rehum and Shimshai the secretary and their associates, they went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. Thus the work of the house of God in Jerusalem came to a standstill until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
All right, thank you. So we see there in verse 23, they went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. So we see kind of the progression of the opposition, starting with the threat of the loss of tax revenue and on to the actual forcing them to stop. And so now, okay, we go on to Ezra chapter 5, where we are introduced to Haggai and Zechariah. So verse 1 and 2 of Ezra 5. Now Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the prophet, a descendant of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, son of Jozadak, set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, helping them. So the books of Haggai and Zechariah are really all about trying to get the Jews to rebuild the temple, and so kind of reprioritize their lives, and obey God's command to finish the temple. And so if we turn now to Haggai chapter 1. So Haggai chapter 1 and verses 1 to 12. Does someone want to read that for me?
Haggai's not my father. Otherwise, I'd be happy to read it.
Third from the end.
I got it, Pete. What verse?
The first 12 of chapter 1.
First 12 verses?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta power up to that.
All right, Mark.
In the second year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the first day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua the son of Josadak the high priest, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, This people say, The time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, It is time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste. Know therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Ye have sown much, and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Go up to the mountain and bring wood, and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. Ye looked for much, and lo, it came to little. And when ye brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because of mine house that is waste, and ye run every man unto his own house. Therefore the heaven over you is stayed from dew, and the earth is stayed from her fruit. And I called for a drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the corn, and upon the new wine, and upon the oil, and upon that which the ground bringeth forth, and upon men, and upon cattle, and upon all the labor of the hands. Then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, and Joshua the son of Josadak, the high priest, with all the remnant of the people, obeyed the voice of the Lord their God, and the words of Haggai the prophet, as the Lord their God had sent him. And the people did fear before the Lord.
All right, thank you very much. So we see there what Haggai is doing is obviously trying to convince the Jews to continue and to restart building the temple. And so just want to go back to Haggai 1 in the 3rd verse. Then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? And so now, back in Ezra chapter, I think it's chapter 3 and verse 7, we see them, they gave money to the masons and carpenters, and gave food and drink and oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre, so that they would bring cedar logs by sea from Lebanon to Joppa, as authorized by Cyrus, king of Persia. So what we see here is the Jews are trying to find ways to justify how they're justifying how they're using the supplies meant for the rebuilding of the temple kind of for their own good. Because in Haggai it says they build paneled houses. And so we just kind of see they're almost like, well, why let the wood go to waste? We already have it, and we can't build the temple because before Darius was king, they were not allowed to. So we see that they already had the wood, so they decided to almost just put it to bad use and build themselves houses. And so that's kind of what Haggai is talking about there when he's rebuking them, saying, like, why have you made your... It says, is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? So yeah, the Jews clearly have some... I lost my spot here. Their priorities are all out of order. And we see that in verse 7 through 8, I think, 5 through 7, sorry. You have planted much and have harvested little. You eat.
Sorry, which chapter is that?
This is in Haggai.
Haggai 1.
Yep. So 5 through 7. Now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. And so we see this is kind of reflective of Deuteronomy. And you don't have to turn, I'll just look it up. It's pretty quick. Deuteronomy and chapter 20, let's say 28. All right, so chapter 28 and verse 15 reads, However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I am giving you today, all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. And then going on to 38, verse 38. You will sow much seed in the field, but you will harvest little because locusts will devour it. You will plant vineyards and cultivate them, but you will not drink the wine or gather the grapes because worms will eat them. You will have olive trees throughout your country, but you will not use the oil because the olives will drop off. You will have sons and daughters, but you will not keep them because they will go into captivity. Swarms of locusts will take over all your trees and the crops of your land. So you see it's that their disobedience to God's command by building their houses has kind of created this drought and all this so just like poor crops, poverty, physical problems, they have come from their disobedience. And so now, if we go on to Zechariah, the other prophet of the time, starting in chapter 8. So can someone read for me verses 9 through 13?
Sure. Zechariah chapter 8, 9 through 13. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, let your hands be strong, ye that hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets, which were in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord of hosts was laid, that the temple might be built. For before these days there was no hire for man, nor any hire for beast. neither was there any peace to him that went out or came in because of the affliction. For I set all men every one against his neighbor. And now I will not be unto the residue of this people as in the former days, saith the Lord of hosts. For the seed shall be prosperous, the vine shall give her fruit, and the ground shall give her increase, and the heavens shall give their dew. And I will cause the remnant of this people to possess all these things. And it shall come to pass that as you were a curse among the heathen, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so will I save you, and ye shall be a blessing. Fear not, but let your hands be strong.
All right, thank you. What we see here in Zechariah, in verse 12, the seed will grow well, the vine will yield its fruit, the ground will produce its crops, and the heavens will drop their dew. I will give all these things as an inheritance to the remnant of this people. So what we see here is that Zechariah's strategy to try and motivate the Jews is more encouraging, whereas Haggai is rebuking them. So Zechariah makes the point that when they start to rebuild the temple, God will kind of promise them blessings instead of curses. And so all these, if we go back, all of these poor crops, poverty, drought, and all that will be replaced with the seed will grow well, the vine will yield its fruit, the ground will produce its crops, and the heavens will drop their dew. So all of these curses will be reversed and turned into blessings once they start to rebuild the temple. And so when you compare the two books of Haggai and Zechariah, you do see a big contrast between them in terms of their strategies. Like I said earlier, Haggai kind of motivates the people by rebuking them and being more stern with them, whereas Zechariah motivates them by encouraging them, being more loving. And so they kind of play like good cop, bad cop, in a sense. And the reason for it is because people react to like rebuke or encouragement in different ways. So some people, when they are rebuked, that does motivate them, but some people will not be as strongly motivated. So like just people react differently to these different strategies. So the contrast between the two books kind of just shows a wider range of motivation for the Jews.
And those curses, Pete, that are in Deuteronomy, right? They were there to, if you don't follow my ways, you'll have a drought. So that you will remember and say, oh, so when it happens, go, well, why are we having a drought? We must be going the wrong way, right? And now that's what they should have done. And as soon as they start to turn back, then those blessings will come about again, right?
Exactly, yeah. And that's what Haggai is saying. Haggai is like, hello, this is why all this stuff is happening, because you have taken like the materials for the house of God and turned it into houses for yourselves.
How easily they really points to our human nature, how easily we can justify the wrong way, right?
Exactly.
Like, hey, we can't use it to build the temple now anyway. Might as well build it for ourselves, right?
Better use it now before it starts to rot.
Right. So easy to justify.
Yeah. So going on, we go back to Ezra. Then we're going to start in chapter 5. Sorry. So here we see letters going from the enemies of the Jews to King Darius, and then letters from King Darius to the enemies of the Jews. So starting in verse 6 through 18, can someone read that?
Chapter 5?
Yeah.
6 through 18.
Mm-hmm.
And a copy of the letter that Tatai, governor of this side of the river, and Shetharbozani, and his companions, the Aspharsachites, which were on this side of the river, sent unto Darius the king. They sent a letter unto him, wherein was written thus: Unto Darius the king, all peace. Be it known unto the king that we went into the province of Judea to the house of the great God, which is builded with great stones, and timber is laid in the walls, and this work goeth fast on, and prospereth in their hands. Then asked we those elders, and said unto them thus: Who commanded you to build this house, and to make up these walls? We asked their names also to certify thee, that we might write the names of the men that were the chief of them. And thus they returned us answer, saying, We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and build the house that was builded these many years ago, which a great king of Israel builded and set up. But after that our fathers had provoked the God of heaven unto wrath, he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried the people away into Babylon. But in the first year of Darius, the king of Babylon, the same king Cyrus made a decree to build this house of God. And the vessels also of gold and silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar out of the temple that was in Jerusalem, and brought them into the temple of Babylon, those did Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon. And they were delivered unto one whose name was Shazbazzar, whom he had made governor, and said unto him, Take these vessels, go and carry them into the temple that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be builded in his place. Then came the same Shazbazzar, and laid the foundation of the house of God which is in Jerusalem. And since that time, even until now, hath it been in building, and yet it is not finished. Now therefore, if it seem good to the king, let there be search made in the king's treasure house, which is there at Babylon, whether it be so, that a decree was made by Cyrus the king to build this house of God in Jerusalem. And let the king send his pleasure to us concerning this matter.
Thank you. So yeah, what we see here in this letter is these enemies of the Jews are saying, is the rebuilding of the temple really authorized as the Jews report? And so I thought we had this deal with King Artaxerxes that they wouldn't build the temple anymore. It's like, what's up with that?
What's up with that?
And then, so in reply to that letter, King Darius sends them a second letter. So I'll read that, chapter 6, verse 1 through 12. So he responds, King Darius then issued an order, and they searched in the archives stored in the treasury at Babylon. The scroll was found in the citadel of Ecbatana in the province of Media, and this was written on it. Memorandum. In the first year of King Cyrus, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place to present sacrifices, and let its foundations be laid. It is to be 90 feet high and 90 feet wide, with 3 courses of large stones, and 1 of timbers. The costs are to be paid by the royal treasury. Also, the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, are to be returned to their places in the temple in Jerusalem. They are to be deposited in the house of God. Now then, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai, and you, their fellow officials of that province, stay away from there. Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site. Moreover, I hereby decree what you are to do for these elders of the Jews in the construction of this house of God. The expenses of these men are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates, so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs, for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and wheat, salt, wine, and oil, as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, must be given them daily without fail. so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Furthermore, I decree that if anyone changes this edict, a beam is to be pulled from his house and he is to be lifted up and impaled on it. And for this crime his house is to be made a pile of rubble. May God, who has caused his name to dwell there, overthrow any king or people who lifts a hand to change this decree or to destroy this temple in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have decreed it. Let it be carried out with diligence. So when they probably received this letter, they were probably pretty bummed. So they were like, oh, like, trying to get another deal going, like, let's have them stop rebuilding the temple. And he says, I don't like that idea. Instead, he warns them to stay away in verse 7. Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site. And then he goes on in verse 8. Moreover, I hereby decree what you are to do for these elders of the Jews in the construction of this house of God. The expenses are to be fully paid out by the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates. So they have to pay for the building of the temple. And verse 11 goes on, furthermore, I decree that if anyone changes this edict, a beam is to be pulled from his house and he is to be lifted up and impaled on it. So if anyone opposes this decree, they are to, they will be executed for their opposition. And so it's really, really kind of, things did not go well for them.
So this reminds me of, I think it's around the same time when Esther is taking place, when Mordecai and Haman were at each other, and everything that Haman planned kind of got turned around on its head. So, you know, the example of who's going to ride around, what's going to be done for the man the king delights to honor, and so he's thinking he's going to get to ride on the big horse, and he has to, you know, he has to lead Mordecai around, and then the same thing with the gallows that he builds. And that's, like, I think that's the one that prompted me, because he says he's going to be impaled on a pole, and I think that's what happened to Haman. So it looks like there's a lot of reversing happening here by God when his enemies, when the enemies of the Jews are rising up against them. God uses those same people to show his message.
Yeah, it really goes to show that the enemies of God eventually definitely pay for their opposition. And so, finally we come to chapter 6, in which the building of the temple is completed. So we are going to read from verse 13 through 22. So does someone want to read that?
I think I could start. I don't know if
Give it a
my
shot.
voice is good. I'll try it.
Okay.
We'll let you know if it's not working out for you.
13 to 22. Then Tatnai, governor in this side the river, Shetha-Rothaniah, and their companions, according to that which Darius the king had said, so they did speedily. And the elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Edo. And they builded and finished it, according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the children of the captivity, kept the dedication of this house of God with joy, and offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and for a sin offering for all Israel, 12 he-goats, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And they set the priests in their divisions, and the Levites in their courses for the service of God, which is at Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. And the children of the captivity kept the Passover upon the 14th day of the first month. For the priests and the Levites were purified together, all of them were pure, and killed the Passover for all the children of the captivity, and for their brethren the priests, and for themselves. And the children of Israel, which were come again out of captivity, and all such as had separated themselves unto them from the filthiness of the heathen of the land, to seek the Lord God of Israel, did eat, and kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy. The Lord had made them joyful, and turned the heart of the king of Assyria unto them, to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel.
Thank you very
Fine
much.
stuff, that's not working.
Thank you very much. So we see here the temple is finally completed, and so this all takes place the third day of the 6th month, third day of the month Adar, in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. So this is 21 years after Cyrus made his decree that the temple be rebuilt. And so we see in verse 16, then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy. And then, so this is the final fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy, chapter 4, verse 8 to 9. I'll just read it quickly. Then the word of the Lord came to me, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this temple. His hands will also complete it. Then you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. So we see Zechariah's prophecy being fulfilled here. And in this chapter, in the completion of the temple, there's really just a lot of joy that's focused on. So the people have a lot of joy, which is very important. So in 16, celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy. Then going on in verse 22, for 7 days they celebrated with joy the feast of unleavened bread, because the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria, so that he assisted them in the work on the house of God, the God of Israel. So it's really kind of like a happily ever after type of ending here. And so their enemies were working with them, and the house of God was finally rebuilt. And it's just a happy time. Yeah.
It's interesting that he's referred to as the king of Assyria. It wasn't actually the king of Assyria, right? He's the king of the Medes and Persia.
Mm-hmm.
So for me anyway, that makes it look both a historical context, but also a prophetic one, because the king of Assyria has more to do with latter-day prophecy at this point, because Assyria is gone, it's long gone. You know, Babylon had taken over the Assyrians. They've been incorporated, but it's interesting that that's the way he's referred to.
It's also interesting when the temple's finished, what you don't read. If you remember in the beginning of Ezra, when they laid the foundation, it says the ancients wailed, they cried because it wasn't as grand. You don't read that here. Basically, that everyone was joyful. And you wonder why. Well, some 15, 20 odd years have passed, and I'm sure they all passed as well. Well,
Yeah,
many of them.
Yeah, a great many of them, absolutely. And also, it had taken so long to build, right? Even though it didn't fit, Solomon's temple, it still would be an incredible accomplishment, given how often they were stopped.
So that's all I have. So
Just go on to the next chapter. Just go on, that's all.
Thank you.
So if anyone has any comments, preferably not as many questions.
Great job. Yeah, thank you.
Nice job, Stephen.
Thank you.
I actually have a question for Butch still.
He doesn't have down.
So I was thinking about, the blessings and the curses, and we, or the Jews, for example, during Job's time, those 3 friends said, oh, you know, you must have done something wicked because all these curses are coming on you. And so it's sometimes, I think, that God does bring the evil on his people for disobedience. But then other times, it's just time and chance that happens, you know. It's not because somebody sinned. For example, the man who was born blind, was it? Or lame? And his parents said, you know, it was the incident where
Like
They
who
have
sinned
2
at this?
sins, this
Yeah,
man
the-
or his parents.
yeah, right. And so sometimes, and so that's, I guess we have to be discerning about that. And I was wondering if anybody had any other thoughts on that, because we know God brought lots of evil on Israel for their wickedness. They were taken to captivity because of their wickedness, right? But you know, that man wasn't born blind because he sinned. So
He allows things to happen. That man that was born blind was for the glory of God, he said. God allowed that. He knew that that was, he said,
Right.
for the good.
So I guess I'm just asking about the wisdom that it takes for us to understand which situation is which. You know, we can't just universally apply the fact that God lets things happen to whoever, because we know he purposefully brings destruction sometimes, right? And it's just having the wisdom to know which cases those are.
I don't think you can do, because it's like God's ways are not our ways, and he doesn't think in the same
Right.
thought processes that we have. Like, I'm doing good, so everything good's gonna happen to me. That's not the way it works.
There's also a difference between individual and national.
Yes.
In this case, you know, in the case of Job, you're talking individual. In the case of the blind man, you're talking individual. Whereas in the case of Israel, you're talking national. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to look at the way God deals with Israel as a nation over the nations and then say, oh, that becomes an individual thing as well. The nation was being rebellious and paid the price through crops and the other things, Ezra 3 or 4, whatever it was. Whereas individually, it's not the same thing.